Act as if your life has already been chosen. Let me ask you something, and I want you to answer this question honestly, not to me, but to yourself, right now, in the silence of your own mind. When you wake up each morning, what do you believe about your life? Do you wake up and think, I am a person who is building something extraordinary? Or do you wake up and think, I'm a person who is hoping things will get better someday? Because I am here to tell you today that single distinction, that one difference in how you see yourself the moment your eyes open each morning is the difference between the man who builds an empire and the man who spends his entire life watching others build theirs. Stay with me, because what I am about to share with you in the next 20 minutes is not a motivational speech. It is not empty encouragement. It is a law, a psychological and spiritual law that I spent over 20 years studying in the lives of the greatest men this world has ever produced. Men like Andrew Carnegie, men like Henry Ford, men like Thomas Edison, men like Abraham Lincoln, and that law is this. The moment you begin to act as if your greatest life has already been chosen for you, the moment you carry yourself, think, speak, and move as though the outcome is already decided, something shifts inside you, something so profound, so fundamental, that the world around you begins to rearrange itself to match the image you hold in your mind. That is not mysticism, and that is not wishful thinking. That is the operating principle of the human subconscious mind. And by the time this video ends, you will understand exactly how to use it. Now, I want you to understand something before we go further. Most people in this world operate on what I call a philosophy of reaction. Something happens and they respond. Something goes wrong and they shrink. Someone doubts them and they doubt themselves. They are, in every sense of the word, passengers in their own lives. Life happens to them, and they spend their days simply responding to whatever comes. But the men I studied, the men who built the greatest fortunes and the most enduring legacies of the 20th century, they operated from an entirely different position. They were not passengers, and they were architects. And the blueprint they worked from was not drawn by circumstance or by what others told them was possible. The blueprint was drawn inside their own minds, and they acted from that blueprint every single day, regardless of what the world around them said. This is what it means to act as if your life has already been chosen. It means you do not wait for proof before you act with certainty. You do not wait for success before you carry yourself as a successful person. You do not wait for wealth before you think like a wealthy man. You act first, you act now, you act as though the destination is not a hope but a certainty. And I promise you, if you truly understand what I'm about to share, you will never approach another day the same way again. Now, let me take you back to a meeting that changed my life. A meeting that set the entire course of everything I have written, everything I have taught, and everything I believe about the power of the human mind. The year was 1908. I was a young man, 26 years of age, working as a journalist. And through a remarkable series of events, I found myself sitting across from the most powerful industrialist in the world. Andrew Carnegie. Carnegie had by that point built the largest steel empire in human history. He had begun with nothing. A poor immigrant boy from Scotland who worked in a cotton factory at the age of 13 for $1.20 per week. And yet, at the height of his power, he was worth the equivalent of over $300 billion in today's currency. I sat across from that man for 3 days and nights. And I asked him one question that I believe is the most important question I have ever asked any human being. I said, Mr. Carnegie, what is the single most important principle behind your success? And Carnegie leaned forward in that chair, fixed those steel gray eyes on me, and said something I have never forgotten. He said, Napoleon, I decided what I was going to be before I became it. I made up my mind so completely, so irrevocably, that there was never a moment of doubt. I acted as though it was already done. I spoke as though it was already done. I made plans as though it was already done. And the world had no choice but to catch up with the image I held in my mind. Now, I want you to hear that again, because most people listen to words like that and they say, that sounds nice. They nod and they move on and nothing changes. Do not do that. Sit with what Carnegie told me, because inside those words is the entire secret of achievement. He did not say he hoped it would happen. He did not say he was working toward it. He said he had already decided. He had already chosen, and he acted from that choice every day, without exception, until reality had no option but to conform. Now, let me explain to you exactly why this works, because if you understand the mechanism, if you understand what is actually happening beneath the surface, you will never be the same. And inside every human being, there exists two minds. You have the conscious mind, the part of your thinking that you are aware of, the part that analyzes, reasons, doubts, judges, and you have the subconscious mind, the part that operates beneath the surface, continuously, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whether you are awake or asleep. Now, here is what the great psychologists of my era, and indeed the neuroscientists of your era, have confirmed. The subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between something that is real and something that is vividly imagined and emotionally charged. Read that again. Let it sink in. Your subconscious mind does not know the difference between a real experience and a deeply felt imagined one, which means this: when you walk, talk, think, feel, and carry yourself as though you have already achieved your definite chief aim. When you act as if your greatest life has already been chosen, your subconscious mind accepts that reality as truth. It begins working ceaselessly, automatically, below the level of your conscious awareness to bring your external world into alignment with the internal picture you are feeding it. This is what I called auto-suggestion in Think and Grow Rich. This is the principle by which you literally reprogram the deepest layer of your mind, not through force, not through willpower alone, but through the sustained, consistent, emotionally charged act of living as though what you desire is already real. And here's what I need you to understand about willpower, because most people misuse it entirely. Willpower is not the force that creates lasting change. Willpower is like a muscle. It fatigues, it runs out. Every man who has ever tried to transform his life through willpower alone has eventually failed, because willpower operates in the conscious mind, and the conscious mind grows tired. But when you act as if, when you change the image your subconscious holds of who you are not fighting against yourself. You are working with the deepest intelligence inside you. You are not pushing a boulder uphill. You are setting a course, and the entire mechanism of your mind begins pulling you toward it. This is not effort. This is alignment. Now I want to stay with you here, because I know what some of you are thinking. I know because I have heard this objection for decades. You're thinking, Napoleon Hill, how can I act as though I have already achieved something when I can look around me right now and see that I have not? And that is a fair question. In fact, it is the most important question you could ask, because right there in that question is the prison most people live in their entire lives without ever realizing it. Most people let their outer world dictate the content of their inner world. They look at what they have and they say, this is who I am. They look at their bank account and they define themselves by it. They look at their circumstances and they say, this is my reality. But the men I studied did the exact opposite. And Henry Ford did not look at the automobile industry in 1908 and say, I will build what exists. He decided internally, irrevocably, that he would put a motor car within the financial reach of every American working man. That was his vision. That was the image he chose. And he acted from that image years before it was a reality. He acted from it when he had no factory large enough, when he had no assembly line, when the world's engineers told him it could not be done. Now, let me tell you the story of the V8 engine, because this story illustrates the principle of acting as if more powerfully than almost any other I know. In the early 1930s, Ford decided he wanted to cast an 8-cylinder engine block, a V8 in a single piece. Now, every engineer in his employ told him this was impossible. They wrote reports. They showed him data. They told him the metallurgy could not support it. The precision required was beyond available technology. The cost would be prohibitive. Unanimously, every expert said it could not be done. And Henry Ford said 5 words that I believe are among the most powerful ever spoken in the history of American industry. He said, produce it anyway. I want it. He did not argue with the engineers. He did not try to prove the technical possibility. He simply held his vision and insisted on it. He acted as though the outcome was already decided. His engineers spent the better part of a year failing. 6 months, then 9 months, then 12 months, and still Ford said, produce it. It will be done, and it was done. The V8 engine was produced. It became one of the most successful engineering achievements in automotive history, and it was produced entirely because one man refused to let external impossibility overwrite the internal certainty he had chosen. That is the power of acting as if. Now I am going to give you something practical here, because I have always believed that a philosophy which cannot be applied to daily life is of no use to anyone. There are 3 levels at which you must act as if, and most people, if they attempt this principle at all, only operate at the first level, which is why it does not work for them. The first level is thought. This is the most obvious one. You choose thoughts that are consistent with the life you have decided upon. When a thought of doubt arises, and it will arise, I promise you it will arise, you do not entertain it. You do not argue with it.
You simply replace it with the thought that matches your chosen reality. This requires vigilance. It requires what I called a definite chief aim, a statement of your purpose so clear and specific that your mind always has something better to return to than doubt. But here is what most people miss. The second level is emotion. Thought alone is not sufficient. The subconscious mind is not moved by cold intellectual ideas. It is moved by feeling, by emotion, by the heat of desire. Carnegie was not simply thinking about steel. He felt it. He felt the certainty.
And he felt the inevitability of it in his chest. When you act as if your greatest life is already chosen, you must feel what that life feels like. You must experience, in your daily emotional state, the feelings of the person who has already arrived. Gratitude, confidence, the quiet, unshakable assurance of a man who knows where he is going and has no doubt about arriving. And the third level, and this is the level that most people never reach, is behavior. Your behavior must become consistent with the person you have chosen to be. Not tomorrow, not when things improve, now, today. What does the person you are becoming read? Read it now. How does the person you are becoming carry themselves in a room? Carry yourself that way now? And what decisions does the person you are becoming make without hesitation? Make those decisions now. Not as performance, not as pretense, but as practice, as training, as the deliberate daily act of becoming what you have chosen to be, because I will tell you something that I have observed in every great man and woman I have ever studied. They did not become extraordinary and then begin acting extraordinarily. They acted extraordinarily first. The behavior preceded the transformation, the acting as if created the reality, not the other way around. Now, there is one more thing I must share with you, because without it, everything I have said will fade from your memory within 48 hours. And the reason most people cannot sustain this practice, the reason they begin with enthusiasm and then gradually return to their old thinking, is not lack of desire. It is not lack of intelligence, it is isolation. Andrew Carnegie understood this. It is the reason he surrounded himself from the earliest days of his career with men who matched his vision, men who believed what he believed, men who spoke the language of possibility rather than the language of limitation. He called it the Mastermind Alliance, and he told me in no uncertain terms that without it, he would have accomplished a fraction of what he achieved. And when you're surrounded by people who act as if mediocrity is inevitable, when every voice around you is confirming the limitations of your circumstances, it is nearly impossible to sustain the internal picture of the life you have chosen. You are fighting not just your own old conditioning, you're fighting theirs. But when you find even one other person, one mastermind partner who shares your vision, who reinforces your certainty rather than eroding it, the dynamic changes entirely. Two minds acting in harmony produce a third intelligence, something greater than either mind alone. Carnegie told me this was the most closely guarded secret of every great fortune ever built. And so I say to you, as you begin to practice acting as if, be deliberate about whose voices you allow into your daily life. Be as careful about the thoughts you permit into your mind as a surgeon is about what enters an operating room. The environment of the mind, the people, the ideas, the beliefs you surround yourself with, determines whether this practice takes root or withers. Now let me bring this to a close, because I do not want to leave you with a feeling of inspiration alone. I want to leave you with something you will actually do before this day ends. Here is your assignment. Tonight before you sleep, I want you to write one sentence, not a paragraph, not a list, one sentence. Write it in the present tense as though it is already true. Write it as a statement of your definite chief aim, not as a wish, but as a fact. Not, I want to build a successful business, but I am the founder and builder of a thriving enterprise that serves thousands of people and generates wealth in abundance. Not, I hope to become financially free, but I am a man or a woman of complete financial independence, and every decision I make reflects and reinforces that truth. Write that sentence, read it aloud, alone with feeling, not just with your voice, but with your whole body. And then before you sleep, hold the image of that life in your mind, not anxiously, not desperately, with the quiet, unshakable certainty of a person who has already made up their mind. Do this for 30 days of consistent daily practice. And I do not say this lightly. I say it based on 20 years of studying the transformation of ordinary men into extraordinary ones. Your life will not be the same. Because the deepest truth I have ever discovered after all the years, all the interviews, all the research, is this. The life you desire is not waiting for you at the end of a long and uncertain road. It is waiting for you inside the person you choose to become. And you can choose that person right now. You can begin that choice the moment this video ends. Your life has already been chosen. The only question is whether you will act like the person who lives it. I believe you will. I have always believed you will. Because if you are still watching, if you stayed with me through every word of this, then you are not an ordinary person. You are someone who is genuinely ready, someone who is looking for the truth and has the discipline to sit with it long enough for it to take hold. That is rare, and it is exactly the quality that every great man I have ever studied possessed before they built anything worth building. Go now. Write your sentence. Read it, feel it, sleep on it, and when you wake tomorrow, act as if the world is waiting for the person you're about to become. End of script, approximately 2,850 words that 22 to 25 minutes at 115 to 130 LP and spoken pace.